I know that you have written a book about it, but for those of the listeners who haven't heard about software craftsmanship, can you probably help to define what do you think is software craftsmanship?
So it's very difficult to define craftsmanship. I think I offer like three, four different definitions depending on which context, depending on which perspective I'm coming from. If we had to try to define, for me, software craftsmanship is about professionalism in software development. But this is a very vague definition because we need to define professionalism as well. So by definition, like everyone that is paid to do a job is a professional. So that doesn't help much. For me, we need to go a bit deeper. The history of craftsmanship starts with the history of Agile. For those of us that started in the 90s, we were in a bad place. The internet emerged in mid-90s and everyone was trying to figure out how to build software. Software became cheaper because before the 90s, software was very expensive, hardware was expensive and stuff. So all of a sudden with the PC and internet, software was everywhere. Software was growing to a degree that was unimaginable before. But with that, we had also a very amateur industry, a very young and amateur industry. Well, we were trying to apply the waterfall or a very strict engineering work. So Agile came along and brought a different way of working that was more appropriate for the vast majority of the software projects being created in the late 90s, early 2000s. Most of us were extremely excited with Agile. I was massively excited because I lived the pre-Agile era. Just to give some background, Agile is not a single thing. Agile is an umbrella of methodologies. Like the way I summarize that, agility is shortening the feedback loop. And as you shorten your feedback loop, you get more information more often. And then with that information, you adapt what you are doing. That's for me, that's how I summarize Agile. And then there are multiple methodologies in there, like from Scrum, feature-driven development, to Crystal, to extreme programming, and principles like the pragmatic programmers guys. So there are quite a few things that together they form the Agile. So Agile started as a developers movement, and we were all massively excited. One of the key things were developers would be close to the business, and we would work in a short, fast pace. And it was also very focused on the technology and business working together and so on. So there was a blessing and a curse at the same time. Scrum, one of the Agile methodologies, became massively popular. And that was good for Agile because Scrum helped Agile to be disseminated across the world. But Scrum is also more digestible or more appealing to managers. Most technical Agile discipline, extreme programming, was not following the growth of Scrum. So Agile started growing, but not in a unified way. Scrum and the process side of Agile grew way faster than the technical side of Agile. And that created a friction within the Agile founders, the 17 guys, so even they themselves had issues. And people like myself that came from stronger technical background, that was more focused on the extreme programming side, that liked Scrum. I liked all the other methodologies. So I'm not here to say bad things about Scrum or any other thing. But the technical side was left behind. And what Agile became a few years later was not what that original group intended. Agile today is seen as more as a management, is a way to manage projects, is a way to manage people, to have feedback in terms of the business, but is not technical. The reason I'm saying that is because this is key to justify why software craftsmanship exists. Software craftsmanship was a reaction to the evolution of Agile. So we started with Robert Martin or Bob Martin or Uncle Bob, as most people know him, and a few others, including myself. We were disappointed. So there was a need to try to restore the balance, to bring those technical practices back into Agile. Software craftsmanship was born as a movement in Chicago, and I was the first one to bring that to Europe in terms of a community. There were other people like Jason Gorman, Ricky Comba, a few other people were talking about craftsmanship, but I was the first one to actually create a community and start sharing those ideas. At the start, one of the things the software craftsmanship movement was trying to do is, first of all, bring extreme programming up. In terms of Agile practices, we like all the other practices, but the one that we value the most is extreme programming. So that was one side. But that's more on the practice side. What craftsmanship also brought to the table was what I was saying now back into the professionalism and pride. So it's making sure that you as a developer, you should be proud of what you do. We are all contributing to the world. If you look at the world today and look at 25 years ago, we didn't even have internet. Today we just go to our phone and you buy food at 3 o'clock in the morning. This didn't exist in the past, and we created that. So this sense of being proud of being a developer as a career instead of just for a few years and then move to management. I'm a developer by heart, by trade, and I want to progress as a developer. So this was important. And then another thing that for me was part of craftsmanship is what we call the career ownership. You own your career. You don't let companies or people to dictate what you learn when you learn. It's like, this is me, this is my career, this is my future. I should own it. I should invest on it. So those are the things for me. Professionalism, pragmatism, and pride, as I say in my book, those are for me the mindset of software craftsmanship. That's what craftsmanship brings to the table. And in terms of technical practice, we like quite a few, extreme programming being the main ones, but we like domain-driven design, we like microservices, hexagonal architecture. There are many things that we like, but there is the mindset and there is the practices. They are separate things.